Hey guys, this is Marc Goldberg from Marc Vlogs Watches, and today we have a special treat for you. It is a lineup of 3 watches that are all to the larger side of what's normal for Rolex. So we're going to be looking at a 42mm watch and comparing that to a 43mm and a 44mm, all in the Rolex family. Now before we start that, I'm wearing one of the watches right now. Take a quick guess. 3, 2, 1, quick wristwatch check. And what I'm wearing is the Polar Explorer. Now, of the 3 watches that we're going to talk about today, can you guess my favorite? And in the comments, tell me which of them is your favorite after you watch this video. Okay, guys, let's get down to business. Now, for Rolex, the Polar Explorer is a large watch at 42mm, but ironically, it's going to be the smallest one we're going to take a look at today. Here's another somewhat ironic thing about the Polar Explorer. And that is, of the watches that we're going to talk about today, it is the most economical or the least expensive. On one hand, on the other hand, I find it actually the most fun watch to wear just due to its dimensions and that bright white dial with the popping orange GMT hand. Now, next in the lineup, we have the 50th anniversary Sea Dweller with that red line that you're looking at right now. This one is 43mm and it's a bit thicker. I have to say it's an incredibly charming watch in the sense that it is easy to wear, or easy enough to wear anyway, particularly if you have a decent sized wrist like mine. And the other thing is, boy, this is a Submariner killer. It's really hard to get right now, but when you wear this, you're wearing a Submariner on steroids. It really stands out. And in fact, it stands out a lot compared to the Submariner. The dimensions are much larger, so this is a watch with a great deal of wrist presence compared to a Submariner. Let's just say it's not subtle. Speaking of not subtle, we have the monster of this family, which is the James Cameron Deep Blue Deep Sea Sea Dweller. This watch is actually the only watch that Rolex ever officially named after anybody. So the Steve McQueen and the Paul Newman, those are all, and the Batman, those are all nicknames that have been assigned by collectors, but none of those are officially recognized by Rolex, and you will not find any of that nomenclature in the Rolex website or catalog. This watch, however, at 44mm wide and 17mm thick, is named for the man who went to the bottom of the Mariana Trench at 30-some thousand feet of depth in his submersible and also discovered the Titanic. Well, here we can take a look around all 3 of these guys at once. Here, of course, in order, we have the Polar Explorer, the Sea Dweller 50th anniversary, and the Deep Sea Sea Dweller. The nomenclature between the Sea Dweller and the Deep Sea Sea Dweller can be a little bit confusing, but when you look at these 2 watches, you would never get them confused. Here's a little bit of perspective. Now, of course, as we change the camera angles here, the perspective can change a little bit, but there you can really kind of see the difference between the 3. From left to right, we have big, bigger, biggest. 42mm, here 43, and come on, camera, get over there. Here we go, and 44 over here. And they also get progressively thicker as you move towards that James Cameron on the far right. But what a lovely collection. I really like this. I'm sorry that I didn't throw the Batman there so you could look at that as well, because that really fits in my mind with this collection. And I have that watch also. Tell you what, guys, now let's have a look at the 3 of these watches on the wrist and talk about each of them individually. Seems fitting to me that we should take a look at this one with some snow on the ground. This is the Polar Explorer in 42mm, as I've said. Taking a look around the bracelet, it's really proportional. There's a really noticeable and beautiful taper. I think that's one of my favorite parts about this watch is that taper, all the way to the clasp. This watch, I think, looks a little bigger than it is because the white dial attracts so much attention, and that dial is huge. This has the fattest hands and the fattest hour plots, to my knowledge, of any Rolex, even the larger ones, as you'll see in the video, don't have hands this big. Okay, so here's your wrist shot of the 42mm Polar Explorer. Actually, before we conclude with the Polar Explorer, let me show you this view, which I forgot to do, which will show you that this particular watch is not super thick. It's not really tall. So it's a very benign, easy watch to wear. It'll go right under a cuff. Now here we are looking at the 33 millimeter 50th anniversary Sea Dweller with that beautiful line of red on the bottom. Collectors just love that. So this is 1 millimeter bigger than the Polar Explorer. And the bracelet is significantly wider. It's also a heavier watch. There's still a noticeable taper, but that bracelet is a much wider bracelet. And this one features the glide lock clasp, same as on the Submariner, while the Polar Explorer has the Easy Link. Like the Polar Explorer, this one also has the Cyclops date magnifier, which is a little obscured right now by the time. And here you can get a look at the thickness of the watch. It does feature a helium escape valve. It is noticeably thicker than the Polar Explorer, yet it is still manageable. This is a pretty easy to wear watch though. It's big, but a lot bigger than a Submariner, but it's manageable. And here we get to the monster of the Rolex diver family. This is the Deep Sea Dweller James Cameron edition. It is 43 millimeters. Now this is the first iteration of this watch, which you can tell because you can see the extreme taper to a unique glide lock clasp, which I will in fact show you in another clip. A lot of people complain that this watch was top heavy because you can see the thickness of it, especially when I bend my wrist here so you can get a look at that protruding case back. This is a monster, guys. This is not such an easy watch to wear. But if you're a fan of big watches, I have a 7¼ inch wrist. If you're a fan of, and it's broad, it's not round. So if you're a fan of big watches, you could probably pull this off. I feel that I can. On the one hand, on the other hand, I'll tell you, this is the watch that you can get wrist fatigue from if you wear it all day, every day. So sometimes it's nice to switch off to something a little bit smaller. What they did when they made the second iteration of this watch was they made the band wider. It still tapers, but it's wider, more similar to the 50th anniversary Redline Sea Dweller that I already showed you. And supposedly that prevents this watch from toppling or being top heavy. They say it makes it more comfortable. I don't know, I haven't worn that one, but I don't find this one uncomfortable, at least on my broad wrist. This watch doesn't roll a lot, and of course using the glide lock clasp you can adjust it any way you want, and I like to wear this watch not tight, but I don't like it rolling around. I think if anything eventually disturbs me about this watch, if I wear it for a long period of time, it would be the thickness and the weight. You know, the weight just can give you a certain sense of wrist fatigue over time, and the thickness of this puppy, well, that makes it a little vulnerable to banging into doorways and catching on things. I've already had to touch up that flank with a Cape Cod cloth. I'll put a link in the description to the video of how you do that in case you get scratches on your watches and you don't like them. Well, this picture will give you a bit of perspective. You're looking at the Sea Dweller, the 50th anniversary Sea Dweller on top, and on the bottom you're looking at the James Cameron Deep Sea Dweller, and you can see a distinct difference in size and thickness from this angle. Now, it's a little bit dark in that sandwich, you know, right in the middle of that sandwich, so you can't quite see, but the Sea Dweller isn't quite as skinny as it might appear because it's protruding down a little bit, but you can definitely tell from this angle that even though the 43 millimeter 50th anniversary Sea Dweller is a very substantial watch, it's dwarfed by that James Cameron. As a practical matter, that the James Cameron Deep Sea Dweller is only 1 millimeter larger at 44 millimeters, but it's 2-point-something millimeters thicker, and somehow or another, by geometric progression, it's just a lot bigger, as you can see. Now, you might be wondering how all this compares to a modern Rolex Submariner or GMT. which are both the same size, by the way, at 40 millimeters. So here's a photograph which shows the Batman GMT at 40 millimeters on the left. It's ceramic bezel with a super case and a maxi dial. And in the middle, we have the James Cameron, and all the way on the right, we have the Sea Dweller 50th anniversary. And what you can see here is that the Batman is, which is the standard and normal size 40 millimeter Rolex, looks tiny compared to these other guys. Personally, I like it, but I feel it has a lot less wrist presence. The power center links, which are annoying to a lot of people, including me, because they can be kind of blingy, and also because they can get scratchy, they at least add some wrist presence to that watch, which otherwise, in my personal opinion, is a little bit lacking. But then again, my opinion skews towards these larger size watches. What do you think?